Welcome back to Star Wars News Net's The Resistance broadcast. My name is John Hoey. Thanks so much for being a part of The Resistance and hanging out with us today. We are only 3 weeks away from Solo, a Star Wars story, and in preparation for that, we have a really special show as we'll be diving into the Han and Lando novel Last Shot, and we have the best guest possible joining us to help us break that down and analyze the book. But before we introduce him, let's say hi to James Bainey and Lacey Gillerin. What's up, guys?
Guys, is it normal to eat 5 soft tacos from Chipotle? Is that too much?
No.
Because I had 5 soft tacos for lunch and the whole medium drink of Coke, so I'm pretty...
That might have been your last shot, actually.
That might have been my last shot, yes. Yeah.
Well, I didn't have soft tacos, but some exciting Star Wars news today, or this week. Very excited, and I'm excited to talk about Star Wars.
That's how I celebrated.
Well, you all out there probably already know our guest today from what might be the best Star Wars YouTube channel in the galaxy, Star Wars Explained, where he breaks down and explains and places perspective on all things Star Wars and Star Wars canon. We are so honored to welcome the also-wise Alex Damon. What's up, Alex?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Glad to be here. I actually skipped lunch today, but I had salmon for dinner.
I had 2 tacos for you.
I appreciate that. I needed it. I needed the energy.
So James had 5 soft tacos and you had salmon. Just like the 2 polar opposites. That's balance in Star Wars right there, folks.
Yeah.
Not light and dark.
Well,
it's tacos and salmon.
Technically, my breakfast was a cookie. I didn't eat until my wife just brought me a cookie at 3 p.m. and was like, eat something.
Right on. All right, so we aren't doing Is the Force with you today because we have a lot to talk about, and since we have Alex, we want to get into a deep dive discussion about Star Wars as opposed to buy or sells, so we'll get to that next week. What we're doing here is Last Shot. It's here. We need to make sense of this thing, and who better to help us than the guy we all go to have Star Wars broken down, made sense of, and in a word, explained to us. So we're going to get into our thoughts on Last Shot, any new canon revelations we find, surprised, favorite moments, Easter eggs, any potential Solo tie-ins, and then we'll quickly turn our eye to Solo and see how the book may have prepared us for the movie. So without further ado, let's get it cracking and talk some Last Shot.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
With first off, I guess our general perception and review of the book. Alex, do you want to start us off with your general feelings about the book?
Sure. I overall liked it. It wasn't my favorite, my top tier. I consider those Lost Stars and Thrawn. But I would place it definitely in the upper half. I thought that Daniel Jose Older, the way he wrote Han and Lando, I was enthralled by them. Is it possible to be charmed by a book? I think so, because I cracked this thing open and both of them were just I found them so compelling, especially young Lando. I think that he really, really nailed him. And I thought he did a great job of differentiating between the young and the old. You can tell that they're the same people, but they act very different and almost, overcompensating when they're younger. I just thought that he nailed their voices. And the overall theme of the book, which I think it has to do with the way that we know Han and Lando mostly as war heroes, but they did some not so great stuff in the past. And it's now they have to deal with the sins of their youth. And I thought that was pretty great. I will say that I wasn't crazy about the villain just because I didn't get his motivations. I didn't know where he was coming from. I thought that maybe it would be revealed along the way, and it just never really was. So it seemed like he was just insane for the sake of it. But I may have missed something. It's just that I didn't catch it when I was first reading it. But overall, I would give it a favorable review.
I think I'm kind of with you on the characters. I think that they're definitely they felt like a Han and Lando for sure, and I was interested to meet some new characters as well, like L3, just simply because we're going to be getting that character in the movie. I did kind of have a hard time following the story as far as a lot of skipping around, and to me it kind of felt like not a whole lot was happening until the very end of the book. I'd say the last 25% of the book, when you kind of get that that big reveal of like what kind of like a little bit more of the motivation of that villain was, and you know, the whole robots mixed with humans and stuff. We're talking spoilers, by the way. I don't know if we said that.
Yeah, spoiler. Sound the sirens.
But that last 25% of the book, I felt if it would have been stretched a little bit more into the early chapters of the book, we could have kept a through note a little bit better. So yeah, I don't know that it would be in my like upper half, but I did have fun with the book and I enjoyed listening to it. Lacey, what'd you think of Last Shot?
I didn't like it as much as I liked The Last Jedi. I really loved the Ben parts, obviously. I thought they were adorable. I just liked how the book gave some reality to these characters, which you don't see in the movies. Like, they're behind the scenes, like Han in the apartment, and he's making calf, and, you know, him and Lando together that you obviously wouldn't see in the movie. I loved the wardrobe descriptions. I think he got those perfectly. And to just hear the way that Lando thought about clothing is fabulous. It was all right. It's tough because I have my favorite characters, so these guys aren't my favorites, but I think he wrote older Han perfectly. Younger Han was good too, but like I really, really love older Han.
I agree with that. That was probably the standout part of this book for me. And usually with Star Wars, it's just like my one-on-one connection with a character more so than, you know, the spaceships and action and stuff. Like old Han just trying to come to terms with being a father and like, can I do this? Am I going to be horrible at this? How do I do this? The kid's screaming, I don't know what to do when he's by himself. Like,
and you're about to be a dad, so
that's what I was going to say. In 4 months, I'm going to be a dad. And so that part like really got my stress levels and anxieties through the roof. I'm like, what if I'm like old Han and I just can't do this and my kid turns into Kylo Ren?
Yeah,
you know?
if you do it wrong, your kid's going to stab you.
Yeah, he's right to the chest. Yeah.
We've been joking about that all week because my kid he's 7 months old and he's like waving like this red thing around and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to kill me. But it's kind of the same thing. Like, okay, so Ben in this book is 2 roughly.
Yeah.
Like I think when we see him, he's about 2.
Uncle Wando. So he's like, yeah, right in that zone.
And he's naked.
But he's but it was kind of cool to get a little bit of a description of Ben at this age, you know, having like these mixed feelings about his father even at that young age, you know.
I thought he was going to have a bigger
when I'm not
role,
around, but he wants me around, you know.
I mean, going in, I thought he was going to be a bigger factor in this book. I know he'd be young, but I really thought he was going to play more of a role. I was surprised.
You know, I was surprised that young Han and Lando weren't a bigger role in this book. Like, I kind of thought that this book was going to be mostly young and a little bit of old to look back. But I would say the main majority of the story takes place with the older characters and how they resolve the situation. And the younger versions of them are more like flashbacks, fill in the story. Just because once we get to a certain point later in the book, well, let's explain what happened and let's go on that little trip with them, which was surprising to me.
What I was kind of expecting when we first got the synopsis, it was like, it's going to be 3 stories, one following Lando, one following Han, and one following both. And based on just like the color scheme of the covers, I thought it was going to be kind of like the Han Solo adventures and the Lando adventures, where it was like, we're just going to give you 3 short stories that are kind of sort of related and they'll all be fun. So like the book didn't do that at all, which I thought was fine. I still liked the story it told, but yeah, I was expecting something very different when I first opened it.
The thing is the covers don't really illustrate an older Lando or an older Han. Mm-hmm. They illustrate the younger Solo movie Han and Lando. So I think that's what you walk in with, and when you get that in the book, but it's not, like I'm saying, it's not more than 50% of the book. More than 50% is the older versions, I think.
They probably just wanted to tease it, like kind of the same way where the Legends of Luke Skywalker book was not really true, and they were just teasing things about Luke. Yeah. And they don't want to give you too much before the actual movie comes out. They want to, I mean, the books are probably, especially this one, especially Legends of Luke Skywalker, they're there to hype you up for the movie. Like that's where they're trying to sell the most tickets.
I have to agree with you on the villain thing though, Alex, because I mean, I didn't even write his name down in my notes here, and I forgot his name already. It's like Pfizer or Dizer or something. I forget.
Gore.
Pfizer Gore.
Yeah. And when you stack him up against Star Wars villains, like it's just like it doesn't add up to like the level of a Vader or a Palpatine or even potentially Dryden Voss or who we see in the film. I guess his motivation kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you guys have seen The Wolverine, that movie with the X-Men offshoot, where that guy kind of like, he didn't want to age and he was all about using the machines and stuff. It's almost like this guy is a doctor, but he's obsessed with machines to stay young. Almost like Vader, but Vader had it involuntarily, where this guy is kind of into it and exploring it. I saw that parallel, but other than that, like I agree, the villain really didn't do it for me.
I think we've definitely seen this type of a discussion before when it comes to droids and their humanity, if you will, even though they're not human, and how they kind of some droids will kind of look at themselves a little bit differently. I think the first touch in canon was that C-3PO one shot, where that droid was talking about, how do we even know that we weren't fighting for the other side a couple months ago when they reprogram us, and some other things like that. And that kind of made C-3PO kind of question some things. And then I think the bigger one is probably the most common one would be, 000, always kind of commonly talking about how he doesn't understand humans, and he doesn't understand it's such a failing system. Droids are forever. Droids are always going to be around. I'm smarter. I'm faster. I can do all these things that humans can't. Why do people seem to think they're the masters? We should be the masters. And that kind of crazy attitude or outlook on life is what makes that character so interesting. So I'm not going to say that inspired this, but I think the concept of any movie or any like machine taking over humanity, because we see that like, we don't think as fast as a computer, so are we really better than the computer, is kind of something that's always been intriguing in our culture ever since the rise of computers and like Terminator came out basically. I don't know, did anybody get that? So well, you were saying you kind of didn't connect with the villain. I actually did kind of think that was like a cool thing, but like I said, you don't really get all of that until like the last 25% of the book, when they start unveiling these cults and these people. Like there were 12 of them, they said there were 12 of these people, and they were like messengers or apostles of him or whatever, and they have all these different body parts and stuff, and I was like, this is all cool and crazy and wicked in a moral sense, but like all of it happened at the end. And I think that was my biggest fault, I guess, to the book.
I will say for Pfizer Gore that he was different, and I appreciated that. I have been saying ever since we heard about Solo, like, and it looks like this is going to be the case, that I want the main antagonist to be criminals. I don't want it to be the Empire. I just want to see something new. And we know the Empire is going to have a presence, and that's fine. But I want the main threat to be Enfys Nest and the Cloud Riders and something. And Pfizer Gore was kind of like that, where the Empire is present, but he is the main threat. And he's got like, I'm also not a big fan of doing super weapons over and over again. And the Phalanx Redux transmitter was a powerful weapon, but it wasn't like a planet killer. So I was like, you know what? Everything is very unique, at least. So I appreciated that. And I do also really like when they talk about droids and their superiority. Like, are they sentient? Like, I mean, I love stuff like Battlestar Galactica and Blade Runner, and like, what does it mean to be human? Like, all those conversations I really enjoy. So I did like that about the droids in L3 a lot.
We also wrote here on the show notes about canon surprises. Were there anything that took us off guard? For me, I think one of the things right away was that I don't know that I ever pictured Lando kind of settling down, but that was a main point in this in this story.
Yeah, I almost saw it as him not settling down, but him seeing that Han did and him thinking Han had it better than he did. So he's like, oh, I better settle down too. Like that's kind of how I saw that. I may have misread that, maybe literally. But I saw it almost looked like everyone seemed to think Han had this great thing with Leia and Ben, and then you look inside Han's brain and it's just pure chaos and stress and anxiety.
Yeah, because he's not viewing it that way.
Okay, so you saw that too, Lacey? Like kind of like Lando probably saw Han's life better than Han it actually was?
I think that's a reflection of people nowadays. I mean, our age group is kind of just like, oh, well, everyone's getting married, so I need to get married, or everyone's having kids, so I have to have kids. And it's that question of like, okay, but do you really have to go that way?
And only the good stuff goes on social media, and the dirty diapers aren't on Facebook.
Right.
The thing, though, is just to be clear, I didn't think that was a bad thing. I'm just saying it was a surprise. So I didn't necessarily walk into this book thinking that I think he would have the hots for this girl, and I think
it caught him by surprise, though.
With her. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, I think like by the end of the book, you're like, man, they're really he's really falling for her. And I would never have thought that of this character, Lando. Again, it's not a bad thing. I'm saying that it was an interesting turn of events, if you will. And I actually almost thought at one point in the book they were going to kill him off. Like, I almost thought,
way. You're not killing Lando in a book, dude. No way.
Well, I mean, are they going to kill him in a movie?
he was mentioned in Bloodline, so I think...
Oh, he was mentioned in Bloodline?
A single line where Leia's like, and I got a note from Lando, and so I was like, that alone, I was like, he's fine.
Okay, yeah, because I was sitting there thinking, I was like, man, is this how they do it? Because that would be a really big surprise, which obviously they didn't.
R.I.P. Akbar.
I don't have a canon thing. I don't know if this falls under canon or Easter egg, but the part where Lando's explaining to Han about his magnetic like cheating dice thing, that really interested me, because I was almost like, did they learn from each other how to cheat? And like he clearly explained how he did this and how he swindled people, and I don't know if that has any kind of connection to the dice from back, that we're going to see at the table there that's been running through Last Jedi and so forth. Can anyone educate me on that?
It might. That part? Well, something that I keep finding, and they talked about this in Last Shot, but in the Star Wars comics, like issue 6, it was a while ago, Leia's kind of yelling at Han about the Falcon, she says like, you stole it, not knowing the full story, and he's like, I didn't steal it, I win it. And she was like, yeah, and I'm sure you did it completely honestly. And he was like, well, if you think Lando wasn't cheating, so like they've been saying over and over that they both were like cheating and during the same game. And I'm like really hoping that in Solo, like we kind of get to see them both trying to out cheat each other. I think that would be a lot of fun. So that stuff might come into play.
Don't you really just want to see them play Monopoly and just end relationships?
No, life. they play life, and then he lands on the one and he gets a kid, and then Lando's like
flips the table.
Yeah.
You actually had me like vibing a Casino Royale like Bond type of vibe in this. Like, I hope this card game is not like a 30-second to 2-minute thing. I hope it's like a solid little scene of the movie where they do kind of play head games like you're alluding to.
Yeah, Alex. I mean, I don't know. I
don't know, man. A 10-minute like card game scene.
I would love it if Lando was in the game and he told Han to basically like sit in the car, and then Han comes in and gets in, and Lando's looking at him the whole time like, what the hell are you doing? I want that to happen.
In the Legends Han Solo trilogy, I recently just read that for the first time and I really loved it. But in the last book, like there is a scene where they play cards, and it's a decent length and it's great. And like, that Han wins. But I was still like really into how it was written. So I would be okay with it happening on screen. But part of me kind of wonders if it's going, like, I can just kind of see it happening in the movie that at the end they both sit down to play cards. We know that the Millennium Falcon is up for stake, and like they both throw their cards down and it cuts to black. And like, that'd be the end. Because like we know how it ends, but
so but this is Rocky 2. This is like no cameras, no press, just us, and then they like throw punches at each other, and it stops like right before the fight actually happens.
Like I can just kind of see that happening.
And then you hear the one person go, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah, we were joking. I think it was last week, wasn't it, guys? Where that funny clip from one of the TV spots where Han's knocking his cards under the table and it shows Chewie, and Chewie just goes like, "Oh God!" Like James suggested that might be a play, like Chewie's playing a part where he's kind of bluffing for Han.
Sure.
Because I didn't think of it that way. That'd be very interesting too. That like, because if you get all the other characters involved in the game, you can fill that scene out a bit more than it just being the two of them going head to head.
But part of me loves the idea that Han might not be as good at cheating as he thinks he is.
Oh yeah.
Like part of me really wants him to like think he's the best, and he's really not, and he just wins on luck all the time.
Oh, I mean, I think that would be the way to go almost. Because that's like the essence of the character.
Yeah, sometimes his luck is going to run out. He's always, hold on,
I
baby,
do it
let's
every
make it through
time.
this, you know? Yeah. But getting back to Last Shot, that's actually one of my things is that Lando comes off in this book very like high stakes gambler. He's been doing it for a long time. He obviously has like magnetic dice and all this other stuff. Han Solo's still like a pilot, and he's still kind of becoming his own by the time the movie hits. Do you really think that, you know, he could win this card game? Like he could out cheat the cheater?
Well, that's why I think it might just come down to luck.
Yeah.
It basically does in Legends as well.
Now, I don't know. I'm sure, Alex, you probably know everything about Sabak. I'm going to put you on the spot and guess that. No?
I'll do my best. It's tough. It's an intricate game.
Because I saw the Hasbro has like their little version, which is called, you know, Han Solo card game, but Sabak includes.
It's called Han Solo card game.
It is. It's called Han Solo card game. I'm not kidding. That's where I saw the coaxium thing, man. All right, so the dice, are they involved in Sabak? Is that
Usually not, but the story of these dice is that Han used them to win the Falcon in a special version of Sabak called Corellian Spike. So we should see those dice come into play. And yeah, maybe, that could be something where Han's dishonesty comes into play, where all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, Lando, we're playing Corellian Spike. And then like he rolls the dice and the dice help him win. I don't know. I don't know exactly how the dice play, because usually Sabak is just like, it's basically blackjack.
Okay. Got you.
But yeah, somehow these dice come into play.
They're shown in the beginning of the movie. Well, beginning of the movie, hanging in that speeder when they're on Corellia. It looks like
he has them. They're probably his lucky dice, and then he uses them in the game for whatever reason.
It's weird that they're like attached to a chain.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You'd think you would like have won the Falcon and then got them attached to a chain, but it looks like he had them before, so I don't know how they
maybe he won his speeder using them, and then he upgrades. He's like, all right, I won my speeder, now I'm going to win this Falcon, this freighter.
Yeah.
They're going to sell a hell of a lot of those things though when that movie comes out. Buy the dice.
Oh, I'll get the
$10.
dice.
I'll buy the dice.
Exactly.
What do you guys think was your favorite part of this book?
One of the moments that really stood out to me that had me like just bursting out laughing was when Han goes up to the Gungan like administrator and starts talking like Jar Jar, and the guy just goes, let me stop you right there, buddy. Like, we don't all talk like that. I thought that was hilarious.
That was really good.
That might be one of my most memorable moments, where just like it kind of, I mean, it's funny, but it does kind of bring up a good point about like, I don't know, racism in the Star Wars galaxy, and people just like stereotyping aliens, and like, yeah, all Gungans talk that way, and that character just put everything on its head, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple moments in the book that you see Han go through a scenario like that, like at the beginning with the droids, where he's talking down to the droids, and Mon Mothma's like, don't talk to them like that, and he's like, it doesn't matter.
It just kind of made me think, actually, that's a little bit of like a foreshadowing thing, like Han not really paying attention to the droids and kind of like whatever. But then later it's like the droids revolt. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of a little foreshadowing there. That's kind of interesting. I don't know that I have a particular like favorite part of the book, but I definitely think like my most memorable moment of this book is going to be when they went to that like, I don't even know what you'd call it, like Zen garden place where they met all these robots, where the whole like dice rolling thing happens, the tea leaves gamble or whatever. And then after they win, like the loss there was that they were going to get their arms cut off, and they're still like, all right, let's do it. You know, like that whole scene, I'm just like, I'm sitting here thinking like, clearly they don't lose their arms, but like, then this weird part of me is like, actually, I don't know. I mean, Luke's hand looks normal. Maybe they both did lose their arms, and we don't know about this. No, but there's that scene, and then after they get their information, they start like walking out, and then the droid says, or I don't know what he is, human droid person thing, starts saying some stuff, and they just start pulling out their guns and shooting people, and I was like, this is a weird scenario. Like it almost felt like Han and Lando, like kind of in a bad way, I guess, but like are kind of, they think lesser of these people. They're just ants. They're crazy or something, and they're like killing them. I don't know. It's a weird scene, but like it's definitely the most memorable of the book, in my opinion.
Yeah, I had two. One I mentioned before was just Han, because it really hits home. Han like really doubting himself as a father, and like, how am I going to handle this as he has his 2-year-old boy crying and kicking him in the face, and he can't sleep and all this crazy stuff. But then the other one was the L3 Lando, kind of like on the same plane, which we haven't really seen between a droid and the human before. When they're flying, I think the first instance I realized it was when they were flying in that ice asteroid field, and she was kind of telling him like, no, you're going there, go there, do that. Where usually it's the droid like doing whatever the human has told them, and they almost have like a more of a respect relationship, which I thought was kind of a new thing that I don't think I've ever realized in Star Wars before. So that I think that was probably my overall favorite dynamic anyway, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, L3 is definitely going to be an interesting character in the movie. I guess we'll talk a little bit more about her with the direct tie-ins to Solo. Did you guys notice any, I'm sure Alex noticed some Easter eggs.
I'm just going to mute my mic.
a few references here or there. Now it's funny because usually they call me the guy that like notes all the little details and things and tries to connect the pieces and stuff, but there's no comparing to the guy who has a channel called Star Wars Explained.
Well, I do have a video with all the Easter eggs that I caught. I'm sure there's some I missed. One of the ones that I was really happy to see was the Lady Luck coming back from Star Wars Legends. That was Lando's yacht back in the day. He's got it again. I was more excited than I thought I would be to see that ship's name. There were a lot of callbacks to the Aftermath trilogy. Like a mention of Sinjir and
Condor Kyle.
Right, yeah, we actually get to see Condor Kyle, and they mention being married now. I'm cheating and looking at my notes right now, just so people don't think
I couldn't survive the podcast without my notes, Alex.
Yeah,
so by all means.
I just don't want people to think I'm rattling this off with no help. Let's see. Lando's girlfriend was part of the Free Ryloth movement, which is mentioned in the book Lourdes of the Sith. Sana Staros, we haven't talked about her, but she is a huge connection with the Star Wars comics. A couple just like random, really vague planets mentioned, or just stuff like that, which is, I don't know, always fun.
I noticed one you actually talked about it in your video too. The you never know that an enemy's actually dead when you cut him in half, or the thing about cutting an enemy in half or something. And I was like,
it doesn't always take.
Yeah, that line to me didn't feel like something they would have said if it weren't for Daniel Jose Older like writing the story. Like that's him talking. The funny thing about cutting an enemy in half is, and then he finishes it and goes, "Oh, okay, they're dead." You know,
breaking the fourth wall a little bit there.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
I have a question to you guys. So the Ewok, who's like this slicer and very technically proficient, was there an Ewok like trading school that happened after the Battle of Endor or something? Like, these guys are in the woods.
Apparently
they're smoking their pipes. They're chopping logs and killing people like Home Alone with little like contraptions. And now this guy's an expert slicer, or this girl, whatever the Ewok was. So someone explain that to me. No pun intended.
When I first saw the synopsis for the book and they mentioned the expert Ewok Slicer, I like rolled my eyes and was like, oh, okay, I'll reserve judgment until I read it. And then I was reading it and I was like, I can't hate on this because I actually do enjoy the character. I thought she was handled very well and was written in a fun way.
It's the same thing as the Gungan.
Yeah.
You know
kinda.
what I mean? Like
yeah.
we're kind of like, well, obviously Gungans all speak like that, or obviously all Ewoks would be a receptionist or wouldn't understand computers.
That's a good point. But my biggest issue was like, okay, we went from a species that was fighting with sticks and stones at the Battle of Endor.
And thought C-3PO was a god.
Exactly. Now 3 years later, like, this is your best slicer. Or maybe Condor was just like messing with them. Like, yeah.
Playing drums on stormtrooper helmets.
Right. Like that, it just seemed like too big of a jump for me. Mm-hmm. But then like one of my viewers pointed out, they were like, well, we saw Poplu hop on a speeder bike and take off and he handled it just fine. And I'm like, you know what? Like, that's a good point. They're very technically proficient. So I'll give it a pass.
That works for me.
Yeah. I actually felt like the book had a lot of, like how I was just kind of saying that, you know, the author had a little bit of like, here's a little fun thing. I think he had a lot of fun throwing in the things that he grew up with. I think we saw a lot of familiar species as opposed to some of the other books that actually try to like build a little bit bigger, you know? In this book, I felt like sometimes when there's just like a group of people over there, of course they would be Rhodians. Like he would do that because
he wrote what he knew.
Yeah, he wrote what he knew, kind of a thing. So to spin it a little bit on, he's bringing in this species of aliens. It's a Gungan because he loves Star Wars, you know. And then in this case, he's like, oh, he needs a hacker. Like, oh, what would be like a really fun, like a total opposite of what you would think? Oh, I'll make an Ewok a hacker. You know what I mean? There was a lot of that kind of stuff as opposed to maybe a new alien species or an alien species we've only seen from one other book or a comic or something. It felt very movie centric. A lot of the species and planets.
Not the new movies though, because we've been talking about that. How we've been missing these old species, so he got them, brought some of them back for us, and a little prequel tie-in to boot, right? It's because there was a Toydarian too, and I at first, because I was listening to the audiobook, I was like, is that Watto? Because that guy, who does the audiobook is so damn good. I was like, oh man, is Watto back?
Mark Thompson.
That's what he
Mark
sounded
Thompson,
like. Yeah.
Mark Thompson is the best.
Mark Thompson's so
he's
good.
Fantastic. He's fantastic.
His Han was so good.
Yeah, I thought his Lando was better actually, but
I think his Lando's too suave. a little too
many
suave.
Colt 45s. Is that what
Was
you're
he
saying?
like winning you over?
Yeah. Like I keep having to pause the book and like wipe my brow.
James for some reason just kept opening Colt 45s and he didn't know why. He just couldn't figure out why he was doing that.
Yeah. No, I think Lando says he says suave things every once in a while when he's trying to charm, but then most of his sentences where he's addressing a situation, but his Lando is always constantly like, that thing's gonna kill us. You know what I mean? Like every sentence, no matter how dire it is, it's always like that suave kind of voice. But
there's no off switch, man.
It's good, and it's such an honor to have someone who would do that, because audiobooks in general aren't that good, but Star Wars audiobooks and having the team that do the audiobooks is so phenomenal.
Mark Thompson's so good.
Yeah, I don't know. Any other Easter eggs or references that you saw or noticed? I think we probably touched on most of the main ones, I would say. I'm sure there's a million.
The beginning, when they're making calf, he talks about getting coffee from Endor. I was
I did
word?
like it was like beans from Endor that were ground on Hosnian Prime, or something, roasted on Hosnian Prime.
Yeah.
They've
Endorian roast.
Those are some expensive beans. They've traveled to other planets.
Yeah.
And we're excited when we get beans from Colombia, which, you know, it's another country. We're talking about different planets these beans are coming from. That's premium beans right there.
We also got Maz Kanata's name, what it means. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That was kind of cool.
I don't remember what it means. Something about smuggler on the ground or something like that.
Something, I have it written down somewhere. Something about the warrior's crown.
Yeah.
Owner of the warrior's crown. There it is.
Owner
there it
of
is.
the warrior's crown.
I always think it's interesting that we got a movie like Force Awakens and we're like, okay, so there's this castle and she's been here a while and like, okay, it's crumbled now. And it's like, that's impactful in the movie, but it's not crazy because we haven't spent a lot of time. We're not like watching that movie going like, oh my God, that castle's been around for so long, but the longer that they show these scenes like in Battlefront and in this book and some of the other books too, even the comics, like talking a little bit about Maz Kanata and how long she's been around and how long she's had this establishment, that going back and rewatching The Force Awakens is going to be like, that's really the castle. That's the castle I've been in 100 times in other books and other things. And I think that's what makes Star Wars so awesome, because then rewatching the movie later and actually seeing the thing be crumbled by The Force Awakens or by the First Order really makes you hate them even more than you did when you saw the movie a couple years ago,
And all the flags make sense now when they walk in.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Last thing is direct tie-ins to the movie. I don't know, this could be a loaded question because what did they really give away about the movie, but yet at the same time we feel like we know a little bit more about some of these characters. I think the big one is L3. Does anybody else agree?
I agree.
Yeah, that and the mention of Dryden Voss's criminal organization,
Crimson Star?
Crimson Dawn?
Crimson Dawn?
Crimson Star or Crimson Dawn?
Crimson something.
Yeah, it's Crimson something. It's not Crimson Tide. We know that much. But how they kind of were after that device, or they were a part of the group. They were trying to get that device, the MacGuffin of the book. And how I think, because if you see the pictures in Solo, it looks like he has a lot of quote-unquote trophies, including the Mandalorian armor. In one of the leaked images, I think we see a taxidermied Ewok. So are they trophies? Are they collectibles? Like, it's interesting to see that there's the tie-in there with the novel, because they were after that device, which looks like it's more of an aggressive device than trophies. So I don't know where his line is. So that's where I'm curious. That's where I'm kind of tying it in there. But I'm curious to see what Dryden Voss is really all about. If it's criminal, is it vicious? Is it violence? Is it power? It kind of left me wondering.
While reading the book and hearing all these things about like what a droid is thinking about in their humanity, I almost even had a thought that maybe the reason we're having a hard time pinpointing Enfys Nest as a male or female is because it isn't either. Maybe they're a droid under the mask. I don't know. And that connection maybe with L3, possibly. And I just started toying that around, but I don't really know, because I think it probably is like a person, versus an alien.
I still think it's Val. I'm going with that one.
Really? Because they haven't talked about her much? Yeah, I don't know. I'm off the twist wagon. I feel like Soul's going to be more straightforward with us.
Well, did you hear the newest thing that came out today?
No. What?
Someone let it go in an interview that Han Solo is like in love with her in the movie.
Oh yeah, I think Tandy Newton said that.
Yeah, she like let it slide, which is like kind of a thing, because if that's the case, then in this book, when he goes to Maz's thing, she's all like, "Oh, what's up with you? What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, nothing." Like, what if he's upset about her? Because she ends up to be. He
did say it was. Well, he didn't say, but people keep going. What girl? What messed you up? So he's definitely upset about a girl.
And you think, like, my initial thing was, oh, it has to be Kira. It has to be. But then when this stuff came out, I was like, oh, maybe not. Maybe that's his past, and then Val is like the middle, and then Leia's the future.
Could be.
Well, you have Sonos in there too, or Sana.
Yes.
I don't know if they were ever.
Her name is so weird.
Really,
but in the comics, it doesn't really specify it. It's kind of like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not with her. And she's like, yes, you are. And he's like, no, I'm not. He never admits it.
Yeah, that was what you're saying.
EU, they were together.
No.
Comics.
Okay, because I thought Sana Starros or somebody was Han's wife or something like that.
That's it.
In the comics, she hunts him and Leia down and claims that they're married. And Leia's like, duh, F? And he's just like, no, that's not the case.
Right, okay. I thought
it was all part of a con. The marriage was a sham. But it's still like they could have,
Banged.
hooked up. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. So Lacey's like, I'll say it.
I'll get to the point.
No, but I think this book is illustrating he's like, he really is attracted to her and he likes her. And many times throughout the book, he's saying, that's why she's got the hots for me. You know what I mean? And then to know that later down the line, there's this other aspect where they were married and like she's around. And then there's also kind of this weird kind of love triangle thing that happened. Even though Han's trying to clearly steer towards Leia, there's this like element of who's this other girl, and Leia's like concerned with that. Even it's a weird set of comics for a little while until Sana becomes more of the team and a more regular character that they just kind of trust as a person. But it makes you wonder what was really happening in these middle years where Han's chasing after her, you know, physically, and then later the next time there's a big gap, and then the next time she shows up like, yeah, we were married. So it's like, you know, you never know if there wasn't like some sort of connection in the middle there. But yeah, I don't know.
That's a good point.
It seems like everyone surrounding Han Solo is some form of a con artist, from the smallest degree to the highest degree. I think that's what we're finding out.
Except Leia.
Yes, of course, except Leia. But you almost feel, at least I feel like the writing's on the wall that him being so jaded towards women as we meet him in A New Hope, that something has to happen to him, as you guys keep saying.
Like James Bond.
Yeah. But now, whether that's Kira or, as you're saying, Val, we'll find out, or it could be both, or who knows. But I think something's going to go down. I don't know. Alex, do you think there's anything with this book that kind of either prepares us, besides the obvious L3 thing, prepares us for Solo, or kind of maybe sets the tone for something?
I mean, I think we hit the two big ones was, L3, and then the fact that Han is upset about a woman. I think those are the two major ones that I remember anyway.
I was trying to think of the time gap here, because they say Lando still has the ship 10 years 10 years ago from 5 ABY. I don't know, it's confusing. Like,
I did all this math. It's 8 BBY for the Lando story, and then 3 BBY for Han's story. Although we've heard that the movie was going to take place 10 BBY, so I don't know if that was like more of an estimate and that it's actually going to take place around 7 BBY, or if the math was just a little off and they might change that for Lando and Han stories. I'm not sure.
It makes sense that the movie would take place between Lando and L3 flying around in this book and Han and Sana Starros flying or doing their thing in the book.
Because
Han's
that
got the Falcon
true.
At one point, and then Lando has the Falcon at the other point. So it's got to take place somewhere in there. We've also heard news, obviously, of like a possible Solo 2, Solo 3. Like, where could those movies fit in? It's still got to fit in that same category, which makes you think if Han wins the Falcon in this new Solo, then where does Lando fit in Solo 2 or Solo 3 if he's doesn't have the Falcon? Is it even the Falcon thing that broke up Lando and Han? Does that make sense?
I think the Del Rey timeline thing, which is what everyone got enveloped in, has to do with the starting points of all these books. Because I think there's one of the books that has a 40-year span, and it's marked in the Del Rey timeline as the beginning of the 40-year span. I don't know if that's correct, Alex, or not, but
I think that's right.
So Solo starts 10 BBY, and it's with their bangs because they look young. It's Han and Kira, and they're bopping around in Corellia, and then it jumps 3 years. Then we're after Lando and L3 driving around. So we do kind of wind up in between, and still, as you're saying, James, leave a little bit of room if they want to throw us a second movie if this one kills it.
Well, here's what I'm saying, though, is when we first meet Lando in Empire Strikes Back, it seems like they have two separate conversations. Like, you got a lot of guts showing your face here after what you pulled, and then they kind of have this thing, and then after that, the conversation sways to something else. You know, oh, what would you do to my ship? I want it fair and square. And they kind of have their things. It doesn't seem like that was the argument that they were in.
What did Chewie say to Han as they're being shot at by the security? When he's like, that was a long time ago. I'm sure he's forgotten about that.
Yeah.
So who knows what that is too.
That's what I'm thinking, because obviously it wouldn't be, I'm sure he forgot about that, the winning of the Falcon. He didn't forget about that.
Yeah, they didn't part ways at this card game. So that's kind of my question is that if he wins the Falcon at the end of this movie, then in Solo 2, Solo 3, if they do it, Han's got the Falcon and it's his ship, but Lando's still around. Riding with him, going on adventures. And then Solo 4, he fights a Russian.
Here's a little concern I have. And first, I don't think that Solo 2 and 3 are like being planned. I don't think.
Thank you. Join my team. Come on over.
They signed Alden up for multiple movies, exactly like they did with Felicity Jones and Diego Luna. Yeah. It's just a thing that you do just in case.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything. But it's kind of like, if Solo blows up, and I think Christian Harloff said this on Jedi Council, actually, if Solo blows up and you're the guy that didn't like contractually obligate Alden Ehrenreich to do more, like, well, you're fired. So it's just a just in case thing. Yeah. But my concern about like Lando is that, again, I just read like all of the Legends stories involving Han and Lando. And Han and Lando part ways on bad terms 3 separate times because they were making these stories up as they went, and they were like, when the first person wrote it, they were like, oh, and then I'll write why Lando was pissed at Han in Empire, and then a little down the road, someone was like, oh, I would like to put Han and Lando together. Oh, but wait, they need to be mad at each other at the end. So Han screws Lando over again. And then they did another story. And the same thing happens. And it's like, if they're not careful, they're going to have that same situation. Because now, I don't think they have plans for Solo 2.
Right.
But that's
an abusive relationship for Lando.
Yeah, right? So they might still say, well, we need to have them not leave on good terms,
right?
But then if they do Solo 2, they have to do the same thing. It's just like.
And then in the book, they meet up again and they're angry at each other. Remember, he punches him in the face.
Yeah.
Well, you know what though? I mean, if that's gonna be a trope, like, sign me up, man. Like they just always end up pissed off.
Lando.
He opens the balcony and he just punches him in the face.
Maybe the last time they ever see each other, like before Han dies and stuff, they're at a diner and they split the check and they get along, and that's how their friendship is.
God.
They split the check and Han goes to the bathroom and Lando sits there for the longest time, and then he realizes Han ditched out the window or something.
I mean, we're getting after it here.
Too sidetracked.
Yeah, I know you have this thing where you do a This Week in Clickbait, so I always make sure when I write our articles at Star Wars Newsnet that I don't end up on your show. So like the
Alex,
title for this one. The title for this one.
You did change the title of your show, though, right?
Yeah. And I mean, my definition of like clickbait, a lot of people think that I'm against everything. Like, oh, don't put circles and arrows in your thumbnails. Don't do, like, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, I don't like it when people are misinforming things or talking about things that they haven't properly looked into. You
mean like Simon Pegg?
Yeah, well, I mean, Simon Pegg, like, now I can't even remember what he said. Like,
that JJ had different plans.
Jedi,
right. Well, I think that was probably absolutely true. That JJ had an idea of like, hey, this could be who Rey's parents are. And he told Simon, and Simon was like, yeah, cool. Mm-hmm. But everyone knew that, and JJ said this in an interview.
He wasn't in charge.
Yeah, JJ said, like, some things that felt obvious to us didn't have to feel obvious to whoever was coming next. And, like, they're allowed to do what they want with these movies. So it's not like he set out this grand plan that JJ or that Ryan just threw in the trash. And that's kind of how people were treating it. And I was like, everyone calm down, guys.
Right. Yeah, it's actually, I saw Bresnikan talking about this, where he's like, fandom always seems to divert to the worst case scenario when it comes to stories. And he's right. We like toxicity for some reason. Not all of us, but in general, we seem to.
Yeah.
But, all right. So I guess that puts a ribbon on this discussion, right? Anything else we want to add about this? No? We talked about diners and ditching on tips, so I think we've run our course here. So you want to answer some questions, Alex?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So Lacey, what do we have this week in Ask the Resistance for our guest?
Okay, guys, it's that time again for Ask the Resistance. Now, we've got a special edition this week as we asked you for questions specifically for Alex. So, Alex, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Our first question is from Mitchell Mueller at Hypernova888, and he asks, if you could have any Star Wars story made about any character, any plot thread, any nugget of history, what would you choose?
I don't really want to go for a character. Well, okay, I'll get my joke answer out of the way. Biggs Darklighter, mustache for life. Like, he's my favorite character. But I don't really want Star Wars stories to do like a solo movie, and then we're gonna do, even though I want to see a Kenobi movie, like, I just don't want them to hone in on one character at a time. Things like Rogue One are more compelling to me, where they're like, oh, let's tell this story that was hinted at. So I don't know that I have anything specific. I really just want them to get out of the Galactic Civil War era. And I mean, people always say it, and I would also love to go Old Republic just because I want to go somewhere we haven't gone before. But I will say that some, like, this little thing that I always thought would be awesome is if they want to keep exploring new genres, I'd love to see them do just a flat out crazy action movie like The Raid. In the book Lost Stars, there's a scene where they have to take over a Star Destroyer, and they're flying up to it and they're going over the mission, and they're like, okay, we need one team to go shut down the engine, and one team to shut down self-destruct, and one team to take the bridge. And it's like all these very specific things that have to happen in a specific order. And that to me sounded like that would be awesome, to just see like a small team of rebels charging through a Star Destroyer, like getting picked off along the way. It'd be like a very tiny little story, very intimate, that doesn't have anything to do with anything else, but I'd love to see something like that. So that would be my weird dream.
No, that would be really cool. I'd see that. Would you guys see that?
I would see that.
Oh, yeah.
You kidding me? I'd see that like 3 times. I would do IMAX 3D, then regular, and then 2D IMAX.
Dude, you got to start with 2D IMAX.
All right, whatever.
What's the next question?
Our next question comes from Blogga the Hutt at Blogga the Hutt. I love that name. I feel like John chose this question. What was Palpatine's plan A in the Phantom Menace? It seems things worked out better for him the way they planned out, i.e. being Chancellor. What would Padme signing the treaty have gained him?
This is just one of those things that, like, the prequels, like, I like them, but they have some weird stuff in them plot-wise. But
you mean you don't want to go to a government meeting?
You're in a safe space, man. You're allowed.
Well, I mean, like, my whole thing is, like, I take the things that don't make sense in Star Wars. I mean, like, there are plenty of things in The Last Jedi that I was like, well, why did this happen and not this? And, like, I do my best to justify them. So for something like this, I would guess that, I mean, Palpatine's ultimate goal was to prove that the Republic was not effective. So maybe either way, whether she shows up or if she signs the treaty, he can point and be like, this treaty isn't legal. He says, like, I'll make it legal, but maybe what he really meant was, I'll point out how not legal it is, so it gets me more power or something. So I just figure either way, he had it worked out so that he would be able to point to the situation on Naboo and be like, the Republic isn't doing anything. Chancellor Valorum isn't doing anything. He needs to get out of here. We need someone who can actually affect change where it needs to happen.
It just makes me think of one of those memes where it's like, you'll sign the treaty. Okay. Didn't directed by George Lucas.
So it's like one of those choose your adventure books where no matter what happened, it went Palpatine's way, is basically what you're saying. He would make it go his way.
I mean, I figure, like, this is kind of closing in on the end of his plan. I mean, this might have been the first step At least it's the first step that we saw, but I figure he's got it all mapped out, so he's like, nothing can really go wrong here. It's just
Or just in his younger years, he's just kind of loosey-goosey about it. Like, he's like, I don't know, whatever comes my way, I'll kind of just use that to gain more power.
Yeah.
And the Chancellor thing fell in his lap, and he's like, let's go with that.
All right, our next question is from Paul Reaper at Reaps11, and he asks, I think it's safe to assume that the front escape pod on the Millennium Falcon is used in the Solo movie. Do you think this will be the infamous cargo that Han dropped at the first sign of an Imperial Starship described by Jabba in A New Hope?
I think it's possible, but my gut says no. Only because Jabba, 10 years later, in A New Hope, doesn't seem all that perturbed about it. It sounds like that's something that just recently happened. So I'm not really expecting that cargo will be Jabba or Jabba related. It could be spice. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to figure out how this movie is going to play out. I don't know why, because I'm always wrong. But in Legends, when Han does the famous Kessel Run that's under 12 parsecs, he's got like a cargo hold full of children slaves. It might be that they go to Kessel and kind of load up on slaves to save, and so maybe they have to eject that escape pod to get those people safe or something. But to answer the actual question, I kind of feel like no, just because I feel like 10 years later Jabba would be really upset about it, and he wouldn't still be calling him Han, my boy.
Quick side question from me. Assuming, I know we talked about this before, but assuming they do Solo 2, Solo 3, or they have any idea of plans for it, do you think they drop that cargo hold in this movie, or do you think they keep that look of the Falcon for that trilogy?
I am expecting that by the end of this movie, it's going to more resemble the Falcon that we know. I do think the escape pod will fire out.
I thought so too until this question came up, and then I started thinking that maybe if they do have plans for Solo 2 or 3, that would be the Millennium Falcon look for that trilogy. But I don't know. We'll see. Again, I'm the same way.
I mean, the toy.
Why bother to predict?
The toy sometimes gives stuff away, and all the panels blow off the toy, and like Alex was saying, it kind of starts looking like it. The body kit comes off. The Lando body kit comes off.
All right, and for our next question is from my boy Trash Buddha at Gorilla Monk, and he asks, yesterday, Alex asked on his Twitter why Star Wars is special to us. So I'd like to ask him the same thing. Why is it special to him? How was he introduced to it? And what made him fall in love?
Yeah. That was a great Twitter thread. Thank you to everyone that responded to it. Like, it was just one of those days where I was like feeling a little down. I was like, what would make me feel better is if a bunch of people told me why Star Wars is awesome. And a bunch of people did that, and it was awesome. So I was introduced to Star Wars by my dad in 95, I want to say. I live in Atlanta, and the Olympics were here in 96, so they were building the Olympic Village in 95. My parents took us down to visit it, and I don't know if there was a convention going on or if just a bunch of people were there, like on the Vegas Strip, where there's just people in costume and you can take pictures with them. Anyway, someone was there dressed as Darth Vader, and he caught my eye, and I would have been 8 at the time. And I was just like, who is that? And my dad was like, oh, that's Darth Vader. And I specifically remember the one thing he told me was that in this movie Star Wars, he picks up a guy with one hand and he strangles him to death. And I was like, I would like to see that, please. So we went home, and my parents had a copy of it taped off of like TBS. So nice. So we watched it with all the commercials and stuff. And it just blew me away, and I think I watched it every day the rest of that summer. Didn't even know there was an Empire Strikes Back or a Return of the Jedi. I was like, this is it. And I think my parents let me wear that out, and then they were like, okay,
Alex, there's a sequel, right?
Right. You're like, then they came home and they were like, we got you the actual tapes, there's no more commercials, also there's 2 more, have fun. And I was like, what?
What was that moment when do you remember that moment when you found out that there was another one?
Honestly, I think I did know, but we just didn't have it. And
I was waiting for this
think
big
I was
moment.
I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm pretty sure I knew, because I feel like my dad told me that Darth Vader was Luke's father.
Sure,
I feel like that wasn't a big twist for me.
Oh, okay.
So I probably knew, but I think I was just so content with the first one that I was like, oh, you just pick them up when you pick them up. And eventually they got around to me. But I do remember the scene that I fell in love with was the trench run. Like, I'm still to this day obsessed with X-Wing pilots, and like Biggs is my favorite character. So that was probably what really made me fall in love, was the spaceships and the dog fighting. And yeah, I mean, I don't know really why. I just always have retained all that trivial knowledge, and it's just always stuck with me.
Well, we just got an announcement last week of the Star Wars Resistance show coming out, and Dave Filoni is saying that's what inspired him, like World War II and the dog fights and stuff. And the first image they show of us is like, a ship flying through the air. You know what I mean? In a cloudy city. It's very like sky and clouds and, flying around. It just seems like it might actually turn out to be a show that's a little bit aimed towards the dog fight, squadron aspect of Star Wars, which could be really cool, especially hearing your story of, what you loved about Star Wars.
Oh yeah, I think I'm going to be very into that.
Yeah.
I love the X-Wing books from Legends. Those were like still some of my favorite books. I love Michael Stackpole and all his writing. I loved Aaron Alston's take on it. So anything about pilots, like, I'm all in.
So before we move on, were you bummed out at all seeing Luke's X-Wing at the bottom of the water on Octu and his wing being used as a door?
Bummed out? No. I kind of thought that we were like, oh, we're totally going to get a scene where he lifts it
pulls it out of the water. Yeah.
But no, it didn't bum me out to see it down there. I guess I just liked knowing how he got there in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So we've had the wonderful warm and fuzzy moment. Now we're going to go into the tougher, the fire-filled conversation that seems to never end on Twitter. Alex, what are your thoughts on Reylo? And what do you see it playing into episode 9? How do you think it's going to turn out? This is a hot topic, and we want to know what you think.
Well, I think that the Reylo ship, makes sense. It's not like it came out of nowhere. I think that clearly in The Last Jedi, they had feelings for each other. So this isn't something that I think is anything to roll your eyes at. I get why people are into it. I think that it's probably done. I think that Kylo made his choice and will not be... I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think he's going to be redeemed. And I definitely don't think that Rey has any feelings for him. Maybe he still has feelings for her, but I think that their connection is over and they have gone their separate paths, because Kylo has now been twice given a chance to change the way things are. And twice he said, no, this is what I want. So I kind of think he's going to stick with it. But, he might redeem himself. Maybe he still has feelings for Rey, and maybe like that could come into play and he would sacrifice himself for her. But to me, that just feels too much like a repeat of Return of the Jedi. So I guess I just see it playing out differently.
And way to
do you want to chime in?
Burning the world down. Way to answer that in a nice, calm manner.
I have nothing against it. Like, anytime people ship things, I'm like, go. However you choose to enjoy Star Wars is how you enjoy Star Wars. Like, who am I to tell you otherwise?
Preach. Like shirtless Kylo Ren. Like, that's how I enjoy Star Wars.
Yeah, Alex, our channel is kind of funny because Lacey is definitely like on one side of the fence, and John is always like egging her behind the scenes, and maybe sometimes on Twitter too. And they're back and forth about that. And I'm kind of in the middle. I'm kind of in your perspective too. Like if it went either way, I'd be like, yeah, that's a good story. I don't
Right. It has to be done right. I'm not saying that it can't be done, but it has to be done
I do
correctly.
have an opinion. I lean one way, but at the same time, like if it did go the other way, I'd be like, okay, well that it's not like they didn't set that up.
I can't help but wonder sometimes that, in Force Awakens, Han approaches Kylo and you know what happens. And then Last Jedi, Rey tries to reach out to him and he's like, nah. And then Rian Johnson had said that, he consciously made a decision not to kill his mom. I can't help, and I know this is going to sound so sad, and I'm sorry in advance, but I can't help but wonder if Carrie was still alive, if in the third one, she was the one to reach out to him.
I think she kind of shut the door on him by saying, my son's gone, and I know that.
But then Luke said that he's not.
His memory is not. Just like Han's memory is not.
No one's ever gone.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
No one's ever truly gone.
I think the lesson, one of them, of the original trilogy is that no one can be too far gone. I don't think that Kylo Ren is irredeemable in the Star Wars universe. I just don't think he's going to choose to be redeemed.
Right. Right. That makes sense. All right. We will leave that topic. That was a great answer. And this is kind of a question for everybody, and it's from Scotty J-Ro at the Scott J-Ro. And
the one and only.
The one and only. And he asks, all right, Star Wars Explain and Resistance broadcast, in your humble opinions, how do you think the sequel trilogy will stand the test of time? In my opinion, I think that they are the most thematic and cinematic set of the Star Wars films yet. Do you want to start, Alex?
Sure. I think that they are going to stand the test of time. I think that, it feels divisive now, but I mean, so did the prequels. And now, tons of people love the prequels. I think it's just, I actually said this in a video that I recorded today, but I kind of feel like Star Wars is a little like James Bond, where people, their favorite Bond is the one that they were introduced to first. So the people that grew up with the original trilogy, they got to the prequels and they were like, this isn't what I wanted. But the people that grew up with the prequels love it. And now we're at the sequel trilogy and people are like, this is not what I wanted. But the people that are growing up with that, I think are going to love it. I think that the classics are probably always going to be the original trilogy because those were especially A New Hope, that was a game-changing film, in film history, not just for Star Wars. So I don't know that the sequel trilogy is going to be celebrated to that extent, but I think it's gonna survive this divisiveness. The people that think that Star Wars is dead, I'm like, do you not remember 1999? It's not dead. It's just that some people are angry, but a lot of people are still very happy that we're getting new Star Wars movies. So yeah, I think that Star Wars is it's doing fine. I think the sequel trilogy is going to be remembered fondly, but just in my mind, I don't think it'll be as celebrated as A New Hope was.
And I think your answer really stems from that whole remember the prequels argument, because there are still people out there that don't like the prequels and are still openly about them, but are openly hated against them, but at the same time, a lot of people have come around on them and a lot of people have just accepted them for what they are. And I think that the sequel trilogy is going to fall in between that. I think they're going to be accepted down the line as, just part of the story. That's what happened. And when you go back and rewatch them, well, at least they're better than the prequels. I think that's how people are always going to look at it. For the people that don't like it now, for the people that do like it now, obviously it'll be the same. We'll always just cherish that movie for how we accepted it when we first saw it in the theaters. But I think the big thing, the reason this question even is being brought up is most likely because people right now are kind of on the fence about the new sequel trilogy. But I think they were on the fence about the prequels. I think that's the big thing. And we all kind of come around, I think.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I see Scotty saying That they're the most thematic and most cinematic set, and a lot of that you can lend to modern technology that the original trilogy really didn't have. I think that James Bond example you just said, Alex, is perfect. Like, you have your Sean Connery people and your Roger Moore people and stuff like that. I don't think they're as on Twitter or as aggressive as Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great analogy, and I think you're right. I think these films are going to age really well because of the example. Look at how the prequels have aged in 20 years compared to how people were feeling when Attack of the Clones came out and Hayden Christensen and all that stuff. My answer is right on board with you guys. Repeating pretty much everything you said. I think they're going to age very well and just keep getting better, more revered as time goes on.
Yeah, no, I think the same exact thing. It's funny, I was talking with a friend recently about this, and they're not a gigantic Star Wars fan like I am. But I was asking them what they thought about the films, and he didn't really like the new films, and he wasn't a big fan of the prequels. And he said that even though I'm not a big Star Wars fan, he's like, I think no matter what I end up watching of the movies, the originals are always the ones that mean the most to me. And he's like, and I'm not even a Star Wars fan. He's like, there's just something about them that just seems somewhat, and he used this term, magical compared to the other ones. Like, there's something that just clicks. For me, I grew up on the originals. I saw them very, very young, and I loved them. And then the prequels came out. So I didn't connect with the prequels like I feel like a lot of younger people now do, especially people on Twitter do. I was saying this recently to a friend that I didn't realize so many people loved Padme until recently. I didn't know that was a thing, which is great. But I get it because those girls grew up with Padme, whereas I grew up with loving Leia and knowing Leia. And I used to run around my house pretending I was Leia's daughter. Like, that's who I looked up to. So when I hear people being like, oh, I love Padme, she's so strong, she's so this, I'm like, did we see the same movie? But it's definitely just the connections people have with it. Just like what you were saying with the sequel trilogies, Alex, is you have a lot of younger people and newer fans, just like with Marvel and DC Comics, that haven't been a fan their whole life, but now they're fans. So they have more invested in the newer sequels than they do in the originals, and that's why they care more about them. So it's just very interesting, but I think they'll definitely stand the test of time, but they definitely won't mean the same to me that A New Hope does. A New Hope is just like what got me hooked on Star Wars, and what I think of when I get all teared up and like so like sentimental about it. I think of Luke Skywalker looking at the sunset. Like, that's what I think of. I don't think of Padme sitting in a delegation, but that's just me. So
but
yeah,
we can all agree that Scotty will mean something to all of us always.
Wait, we all love Scotty.
Yeah.
Of course, Scotty, you mean so much to this show. Thanks everybody for your questions. We really appreciate them. If you want your question featured on the show, tweet at us with hashtag AskTheResistance, and you could be featured on next week's show. Back to you, John.
All right. Thanks, Lacey. And thank you to our special guest, Alex Damon. Round of applause. Mr.
Alex,
Star Wars
thank you so much.
So, Alex, you probably have a bunch of stuff to plug, and including your channel, so just plug away.
Yeah, I mean, my main thing is my YouTube channel. It's just called Star Wars Explained. Search for that on YouTube, and you'll find it. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, which is just Star Wars Explained. On Twitter, we're Star Wars Explained with no ED because there was no room. Also, you can follow my wife on Twitter. She's at Molly Damon. She does a lot of pretty much all of the social media side of things because she knows it a lot more than I do. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right. And we want to thank our listeners for supporting the show and spreading the word. You are the reason we're growing. If you haven't, subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or YouTube. And please take 5 seconds to rate us 5 stars on iTunes and like and comment on our YouTube videos. Buy some Resistance Broadcast merchandise. Head to our store, tpublic.com/user/Resistance Broadcast. Grab a shirt, mug, tank top, sticker, whatever you'd like in one of our 30 designs. James makes most of them, and it is the best way to support our show, so thank you. As always, be sure to head to our website, StarWarsNewsNet.com, for all of your latest Star Wars news and information, and our new website, Movie Newsnet, which just launched last week. James, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MyraTrunks, but if I'm on YouTube, most of the time I'm watching a video on every Jedi ever in canon, and then following that up with every Jedi ever in Legends, and that is thanks to Alex.
Did I do that?
I don't know, but that's the type of videos that I watch from your channel all the time. It's every time something was mentioned in
I don't even know anymore.
Every time it's mentioned in Legends, and I'm like, all right, let's do that.
Yeah, I wonder if Alex, like, people come up to him at cons and celebrations. They're like, dude, your video on this. And he's probably like, did I make that video?
Sometimes.
Lacey, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at Lacey Gillerin, as usual, tweeting pictures of a shirtless Kylo Ren.
There it is.
Fighting the good fight for Ben Solo.
There it is.
Making John hate me every day.
Subliminally getting me to like shirtless Kylo or something. I don't know.
And probably either one of two things, Therm scissor punching or watching videos about super smart things from Alex, because I know nothing about Star Wars, apparently.
I am ready for Therm.
You guys can find me on Twitter at Johnny Hoey and writing over at StarWarsNewsNet.com. And yes, I always watch Alex videos. They are very informative, and sometimes canon gets my brain all jumbled, and you help even all that out for me. So thank you, Alex. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. I hope you had as much fun as we did. Thank you so much for coming, man.
Actually, you know what? I do have one more thing to plug. This Friday, every May 4th, I do a giant, like, it's my biggest video of the year. I do a full canon timeline. So this Friday, I think I've got like a 36-minute video coming out. It covers all the books, all the comics, all of Rebels, and like, well, the biggest parts of Rebels and the Clone Wars. So it's like everything that ever happened in Star Wars from start to finish. So that should help straighten things out for you.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a test? I'm kind of worried.
No test. No.
I was going to say, how do you do it in 36 minutes when it takes everybody else in the franchise like 20-minute episode, 4 seasons, like 2-hour movie, another 2-hour movie, another 2-hour, and Alex manages to knock out, here's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I just try to keep everything like down to a sentence or two, and like, here's the date, here's the story, like, go nuts.
All right,
So
now
killer.
This might be like a warm-up for you, because I heard that you have some kind of big trivia matchup coming up live in LA. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm doing the movie trivia schmodown for the second time. Last time I faced off with Steele Saunders from Steele Wars podcast, Geek Girl Diva, Joseph Scrimshaw from Force Center, and Sam Witwer. And me and Joseph tied for second. We lost to Sam. If you're going to lose to Sam, that's okay. That's the person to lose to. But this time it's going to be me and Joseph and Ken Knapsack, also from the Force Center podcast and Collider
Who
Jedi
has
Council.
beat Sam before.
Yes, he has. So whichever of us wins is going to get the chance to go on and face Sam for the belt. So I'm coming for that belt.
All right. How do you usually watch? Do you usually watch your own videos to prepare? All joking aside.
Not really. Although Ken has said that he has watched my videos to prepare, so I keep telling him. I tell him that I'm going to start putting false information in there. Just I haven't done that, so don't worry. But
You just do a video that's like everything you need to know about the schmodown.
yeah, for the schmodown, that's actually not a bad idea. That could be funny.
Or you could just do 10 reasons why I'm going to win the fight or something like that, or win the battle.
To study, what we did last time was Molly and I watched the movies, and she just wrote like as many trivia questions as she could while we were watching them. So she was just constantly typing, and then at the end she quizzed me, and there were quite a few questions that came up that I would not have known without studying. At first I was like, I don't need to study. I don't have time to study. And if I hadn't, like, I would have been really mad at my performance.
Shout out to Molly being the real MVP.
Yeah.
She is the real MVP.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you guys win that belt, how about you come back and tell us about it sometime?
I would love to.
All right. Thank you
Bring
so much
Molly.
for coming on, man. We really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
All right. And thank you all once again out there listening for joining us and being a part of the Resistance, hanging out with us today. We hope you enjoy the show. Enjoy your weekends, and we'll see you again on Monday morning with a new episode right here on the Resistance broadcast.